Does Miami have what it takes to beat Clemson? Is UNC really a top 10 team? And I preview each of the matchups for Week 3 of the College Pick'em season. I'm Jay Smith, and this is After Further Review.
And now, after further review, a Clemson student's perspective on sports.
And a personal foul on number 99 of the defense. After he tackled the quarterback, he's giving them business down there. That's a 15-yard penalty.
Welcome in, everyone. I'm Jay Smith, and yes, this is After Further Review. This is the Friday show. Thanks so much for tuning in, whether it's through the podcast or watching on Facebook. Let's get right into it. The big game this weekend, obviously, is Miami at Clemson. Number 7 Hurricanes take on the number 1 Tigers in Death Valley. Saturday night primetime game, and this is probably the biggest game in the ACC that we have seen really since Clemson and Louisville. In 2016 between, John Watson and Lamar Jackson. That game obviously had a lot of hype, and it was really a result of the drubbing that Louisville gave Florida State a couple weeks earlier. Going into that matchup, Louisville was riding really high. Lamar Jackson performed exceptionally well. And so, Clemson had already established themselves with a previous college football playoff national championship appearance the year before. So we all knew what Clemson was about. We didn't have a lot of context on Louisville at the time other than that Florida State game. But either way, there was a huge, build up to that game. And, after everybody saw Louisville take down Florida State 63-20, everybody was, obviously in shock. But we all kind of got to see a glimpse of what Lamar Jackson would become and everything that he was capable of. And again, that game obviously being at Louisville, it was a different environment than it was at Clemson. But still a thorough beatdown of a really good Florida State team. A Florida State team that at the time was ranked 2nd. Louisville came into that game ranked 10th, I believe. And yeah, it was just never close. Louisville came out guns blazing, went up 14-0. Florida State was able to scratch and claw their way to a 4-point differential. It was 14-10 about midway through the second quarter, and then after that, the rest of it was all Louisville, and that was largely on the back of Lamar Jackson, who, he ran for 4 touchdowns in that game, threw for another, and it was just overall a really dominant performance. So the reason that we're talking so much about Clemson-Louisville 2016 is because that is sort of the same vibe that we're getting with Clemson and Miami for this year. And look, obviously, if you don't trust Miami yet, it's understandable, right? The Hurricanes, they've lost their last 3 games as a top 10 team, and they haven't finished in the top 10 since 2003. So it's been, almost most of my entire lifetime since we've really seen Miami start the season and finish the season in a consistent way, especially as one of the top programs in the country. And so far, Miami, they've beaten Louisville, Florida State, UAB by an average score of 43-19. Now, again, Florida State and UAB are pretty close to the bottom in terms of competition. Louisville is a little bit more of a middle-of-the-pack team, but either way, this is their first real test, a trip to Clemson, right? It's their first real test. And then you got to look at the recent history of these two schools and how in previous matchups, obviously everybody knows about that 56-0 game back in, I think it was 2015, that basically cost Al Golden his job at Miami. Again, that was a complete obliteration. I believe this game, I think it was October 24th, 2015. It's 58-0. Excuse me, not 56. It was 58-0. And, Deshaun Watson only had one touchdown in this game. Only had 143 yards passing. And, a lot of guys got playing time, obviously, by the second half. And Clemson definitely let their foot off the gas when it was 42-0 at halftime. But one of the biggest things about this matchup specifically is there was a lot of jawing back and forth. There was a lot of talk and a little bit of pregame fireworks, I guess you could say, where some Miami players were getting up in the faces of the Clemson guys warming up, and Clemson came out and spanked them, right? They came out and spanked them, shut them down in all phases of the game, and that 58-0 victory for the Tigers is really what cost Al Golden his job. So recently, Clemson has been able to take care of Miami, but this is not the same Miami team that we saw in 2015, right? This is a different team, different culture, different coach. And so, when you look at this matchup, obviously Clemson's favored, right? That comes as no surprise. And it's really, we see Clemson lose so infrequently at this point that it's almost hard to imagine, what it looks like, because since the start of 2015, so going back 5 seasons to their first college football playoff appearance season, when they faced off against Alabama in the national championship and lost in 2015. Since the start of 2015, Clemson is 72-5. 72-5 in those 5 years. Now, I think you can learn more from those 5 losses about Clemson than you can from the 72 wins. And that's usually the case across the board, right? You learn more about someone or something from the mistakes they make rather than the successes they have. So in that 72-5 record since the start of 2015, what can we learn about Clemson? Well, first off, you have to be able to score. You have to keep up with the score on the scoreboard, right? You cannot really shut down the Tigers. In 4 of the 5 losses, they scored at least 24 points. Obviously, the exception to that is the 2017 Sugar Bowl against Alabama, when they lost 24-6 with Kelly Bryant quarterbacking. And again, that was a bit of a slobber knocker, and Clemson never really got going on offense. It's one of the few games I have seen in the last half decade where Clemson's offense just never got going. Kelly Bryant never got settled. The offensive line gave him no protection, and Alabama was relentless for 60 minutes, which is something that very few teams can do against a caliber team like Clemson, a high caliber team. So again, so we got 4 of the 5 games, Clemson scoring at least 24 points. So you remove the outlier, and another in terms of being successful against Clemson. When you look at those 4 losses, opponents have averaged about 350 yards passing and about 4 touchdowns. The clock's in like 3.8. So essentially you need about 28 points. And you can't turn the ball over. So in these 5 losses, opponents have only turned the ball over 3 times. 5 games that Clemson's lost in the last 5 years, and there have been 3 total turnovers in those games. So, number 1, you have to be able to score. Got to score at least, I think 30. 30 is the magic number. If you can hit 30 based off of, again, the recent history of the last 5 years, you stand a pretty good chance. So you need to score at least 30 points. You need to throw for about 350 yards. And you really don't even need to turn the ball over. I mean, maybe 1 turnover. But for the sake of this example, we're going to say you can't turn the ball over. So again, 30 points, 350 yards passing, can't turn the ball over, and you need to have some explosiveness on offense. And that's where Miami really, when you look at this game, it really gets intriguing because Miami has a lot of that. They have a lot of explosiveness. Quarterback Derek King has completed passes of 75, 47, 40, and 31 yards in his first 3 games. And he hasn't thrown a pick yet. That's key. That is key. because when you're going into this kind of matchup, you need to have confidence. You need to have swagger. You need to feel like you can go toe-to-toe with one of the best programs of the last 5, 6, 7 years. And right now he has that. Miami is humming on offense. They're a well-oiled machine on offense. Their quarterback has yet to throw an interception, so there's no cloud hanging over his head. And they've illustrated that they can move the ball very effectively. Yes, the opponents are not the same caliber as Clemson. However, this is college football. And if you play inspired, you can play against anybody and stand a chance. And so there's a lot of things that have gone Miami's way leading up to this game. And it's similar. And again, that's why I started the show with the comparison to 2016 Louisville. When Lamar and Louisville came into Death Valley in week 5 of the season, the 2016 season, they were riding high. Heisman watch for Lamar, talks of ACC championships and a potential, national championship run. And there was a lot riding on that game. Right, Clemson's in that game too. They had already demonstrated an ability to make a run at a college football playoff, compete in a national championship. And so, for Louisville, they had to come in with a mindset of, look, we can compete with these guys. We can go toe-to-toe with these guys. And they did for the entire game. Everybody remembers how close that game ended up being. Now, it went back and forth. Obviously, it was scoreless in the first quarter. Then it was just explosion in the second quarter. Clemson put up 4 touchdowns. Louisville scored 10 points. It was 28-10 going into the half. And then all of a sudden, Louisville came back in the third quarter, right? They blanked the Tigers, and Louisville put up 16 points. And we went into the fourth quarter with a 28-26 ball game. And, Clemson ended up scoring 2 touchdowns. Louisville got the touchdown and the field goal. And then everybody remembers that one play down near the goal line where the receiver spun towards the perimeter, towards the sideline, and didn't outstretch his arm and came up a yard short. Game could have gone either way, to be honest with you. So, again, this example, this is the template. Okay, if you're Miami, this is your template. Not just because it's the biggest matchup in recent history for the ACC and especially at Clemson, but because this is a team that was in a very similar place mentally going into this matchup. Early, starting to get into the middle of the season, but we're still kind of early in the season. They've showcased their ability. They've performed very well. There's a lot of hype now that wasn't there at the beginning of the season, or that was more subdued at the beginning of the season. And so, if you're Miami, you got to look at this game. You have to look at this game. It doesn't matter that Louisville ended up losing this game. The point is there was an opportunity at the end of the game for Louisville to win this football game. And some could even make the case, and I certainly don't disagree with this, that Louisville lost this game. Clemson didn't necessarily win it. 2015 against Notre Dame, Clemson won that game. Clemson made a stand, prevented the 2-point conversion. Ben Boulware stuffed it up the middle. Okay, this 2016 game, Louisville lost this game more than Clemson won it. So if you're Miami and you're looking at this matchup, and you're looking at Clemson's 72-5 record since the start of 2015, I think you ignore the external pressures and you focus internally and you look at what your team has done so far. And you say, guys, I think we have a good chance. Now, listen, that doesn't mean that Miami can compete and win this game if they don't perform exceptionally. They're going to have to be exceptional. Miami's receivers are going to have an opportunity to make some plays, and they're going to have to make them. They're going to have to capitalize. Mike Harley, Mark Pope, wide receivers from Miami, they've suffered a few drops There's been a few points in some games where they've had some drops, and you can't do that against Clemson. You must capitalize when you have the ball. You must move down the field quickly, put that Brent Venables defense on its heels, and you've got to put it in the end zone. Now, another wild card for Miami is their tight end Brevin Jordan. That's someone that De'Aaron King loves to throw to, and it's kind of like a Tom Brady Gronk relationship, right? Where it's a great option. It's a Hunter Renfrow. So Miami certainly has to be coming into this game with the right mindset, and I think they are, because they've demonstrated what they're capable of. But that you have to play 60 minutes of football against Clemson. And then the other thing that they really need to do is they need to pressure Trevor Lawrence, or else he's going to pick them apart. Even in their losses, as we've kind of talked about throughout this, Clemson's offense is generally pretty strong. However, if there is a weakness, if there's one thing that you can look at and say, here's the weakness, it would probably be against a stronger pass rush. If you look at the sack rate in their wins, their 72 wins since 2015, it's about 1.3 per game. So we'll say 1.5 sacks per game. Even though, half sacks are rare, and even still, it's about a sack and a half a game in their wins that they've allowed since 2015. You look at their sack rate in the losses, it's about 3 a game. And there's no better way to stall a drive and kill momentum than a negative play, tackle for loss. Doesn't matter if you're blowing up a run in the backfield. Doesn't matter if you blow up that bubble screen out to the perimeter, or if you get to the quarterback. The best way for Miami to neutralize Trevor Lawrence's ability to pick the secondary apart is getting to the quarterback and sacking him. You have to bring this guy down. So, obviously, that's easier said than done, right? You can say, you got to sack the guy. Well, you have to get through that Clemson offensive line. And Miami, has, I think, the ability to get to the quarterback. They may have to dial up some blitz packages. I don't know if they can bring 4 and still get to Trevor Lawrence. And again, you have to look at Clemson, right? They lost 4 offensive line starters from last season, and they've had a few glitches up front. Virginia and Wake Forest sacked Trevor Lawrence twice, and that was really they weren't really facing a lot of blitzes against those two teams. So Clemson right now is 35th in the country in sack rate allowed, and Miami needs to take advantage of this. They need to dial up a few blitz packages, try and confuse that offensive line that doesn't have a lot of experience under their belt, and Miami needs to seize this opportunity because, again, there is no better way to kill a drive and change the momentum of a game than with a negative play. A tackle for loss. And right now, Miami is second in pressure rate for quarterbacks. Again, you have to look at their opponents, and you say, this is Florida State, this is UAB, this is Louisville. But they've demonstrated that they have the ability to get to the quarterback, and they have the ability to at least pressure him. So again, if Miami can get to the quarterback here, if they can pressure Lawrence and prevent him from going through his progressions and getting settled, that can really disrupt Clemson's offense. So, it's a fine balance, right? Because we're going to talk about the counterpoint to this, and if they pressure them too much, right? If they come after Lawrence too much, he's just going to check it down to Etienne, and they're not going to get a lot of stops. Clemson's going to be able to move the ball methodically. And you have to look, Etienne's averaging 6.2 yards per carry right now. And Braden Galloway, the tight end for Clemson, he's getting a little bit more involved than tight ends recently for Clemson. And so, they have a lot of weapons, is the best way to summarize this. Clemson has weapons at wide receiver, they have weapons at tight end, they have weapons at running back, and they have a quarterback that's a weapon. So unless you attempt to neutralize all of those weapons, what's going to happen is you're going to blitz the quarterback, and he's just going to check it down to the running back, and they're just going to dink and dunk 8, 10-yard gashes, and that's going to wear down the defense. So blitzing all out is not the answer. It's going to have to be more subtle if you're Miami. And here, again, we've talked about a little bit of the X's and O's here. In terms of who has the momentum, going into this particular matchup, I feel like right now, just the nature of things, Miami has more momentum. Miami has more momentum going into this game. And the reason for that, the reason that I'm saying that Miami, because you're like, well, Clemson's the number one team in the country. I mean, why would you say that Miami has more momentum if they're, if they're not ranked as high as Clemson and everything? And it's because Clemson has everything to lose, and Miami has everything to gain from the outcome of this game. And again, that's what you get. That's what you inherit when you are a top-tier program like a Clemson, an Ohio State, and Alabama. Everybody's gunning for you all the time. You're going to get everybody's best shot. Doesn't matter if it's Wake Forest. Doesn't matter if it's Miami. Doesn't matter if it's Oklahoma. I mean, whoever it is, you're going to get their best shot. And so, Clemson they've traveled to Wake at the beginning of the season, took care of that game handily. The Citadel and UVA at home didn't pose much of a challenge. And then Miami, had UAB at the start, a road trip to Louisville, right? That was a game of the week. It was a primetime game. They won that one 47-34. And then FSU, they took care easily, 52-10. Ignoring the score differential, if you were to ask me who has momentum right now, more momentum, I would say it's Miami. Their quarterback is on fire. He hasn't thrown a pick. He has taken out huge chunks on offense. Miami's demonstrated an ability to move the ball. They've demonstrated an ability to get to the quarterback, to cause some disruption. And so, I think this is going to be a really good game. I think it's going to be a really close game because, again, this is the toughest opponent that Clemson has had to face in the ACC since Louisville and Lamar Jackson in 2016. So, in terms of who I'm picking, I'm going with Clemson. I think Clemson wins this game. I think the fact that it's at home for Clemson is huge. I think if this game is at Miami, it's a toss-up. I think it's a serious toss-up. But I would give Clemson about a touchdown advantage right now. I think this is going to be a pretty high-scoring game. I expect both teams to hit the 30 mark by the third quarter. And I'm feeling like 38 to either a 38-35 game where Clemson's edging them by a field goal, or a 38-31 game where both teams have a field goal and Clemson's got the 5 touchdowns, Miami's got the 4. However, I think the first team to hit that mid-30 mark, that 35, I think that's the magic number in this matchup. I really do. I don't see this game being stuck in the teens or the 20s. I don't think it's going to stretch into the 40s or 50s like a Big 12 matchup. This isn't Texas and Texas Tech from a couple of weeks ago. There are still defenses in the ACC, and Clemson has a really good one. And Miami's is decent too. So I don't think they're going to run all over the defenses. But I think Clemson wins this game. I think it's going to be a good test to determine where they are, coming off of a 14-1 season the year before. Obviously, the loss to LSU in the championship game. We haven't had an opportunity to see what Clemson looks like this season against a high-caliber opponent. So this is a great opportunity for that. And on the other side of that, I think this is a great building block for Miami. Even if they don't win this game, even if they drop this game by less than 10 points, if this game is a one-possession game, final score, that's a win for Miami. In terms of of building and moving forward and saying, look, we demonstrated an ability to compete against the top program in the country on the road at night early in the season. That would be huge for Miami, and it would legitimize them in a way that we haven't been able to in the past. Right? The whole Miami's back. Well, not really. Well, this is it. This is the test. And I think they're up for the challenge. I think Miami's up for the challenge. This is going to be a fantastic game. This is going to be a great game. It's going to be back and forth, and I could see Miami leading for part of this game. I think Clemson may get the first score, but then I think Miami may go on a tear, and maybe it's 17-10, maybe it's 21-14, and then I think Clemson will play strong in a third quarter. I think Miami may take the lead going into the half, and Clemson may have to kind of dig themselves out of a hole in the third quarter, and it might even up in the fourth quarter, right? We saw that with the Clemson-Louisville game, right? Clemson went into the locker room with a nice lead. Louisville comes out, blanks them in the third quarter, puts up 16 points. So there will definitely be momentum swings in this game, and a lot of that will be a result of turnovers. So, again, this is going to be a great matchup. You definitely need to tune in. A lot of X's and O's to break down in this one, but I think at the end of the day, Clemson's going to get this one done. I think the final score of this one, I'm going to go 38-35. I think it's going to be fantastic. I think it's going to be a must-watch, one of the best games so far in this season. Well, let's take a break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking about UNC, and if they're really a top 10 team, they face off against Virginia Tech this weekend. We'll break down that matchup. That's next. Welcome back to the show. I'm Jay Smith, and you are listening to After Further Review. Again, thanks so much for tuning in. All right, so we've talked about Clemson-Miami. That's the marquee matchup of this weekend. Obviously, there's a few other games on the slate that are worth mentioning, and specifically, we're going to talk about UNC, a team that sits 8th right now in the AP poll, and they are taking on Virginia Tech this weekend, sitting at 19. This is going to be a really, I think it's going to be a good game. I think it's going to be a game that won't get as much attention, not just because of Clemson-Miami, but because of some other matchups in the SEC this weekend that may kind of overshadow this particular matchup. But I really think, this game right here is going to show us a lot about where those teams that are below Clemson and maybe even Miami are in the ACC. This is a North Carolina team that's 2-0. They had to cancel their game against Charlotte, the 49ers, earlier this season. So they've got a win against Syracuse and then a close win on the road at BC under their belts. And then if you look at Virginia Tech, right, they have wins against NC State, pretty convincing win, 45-24, and then a close road win at Duke, 38-31. So both of these schools coming in at 2-0. And again, there's a lot of teams right now jockeying for this number 2, number 3 slot, if you will, in the ACC. You got Clemson's at the top until proven otherwise. We're gonna put, I think, Miami and Notre Dame comfortably in there in the second and third. Now if Clemson comes out and drops Miami, obviously Notre Dame will be the new consensus number 2. But either way, for this example, Clemson's at the top. Then you got Notre Dame and Miami, and then you kind of have North Carolina and Virginia Tech. Pitt was on the radar until their loss this past weekend. But even still, there's a lot of intrigue in the ACC this year, which is great because it has been really dry the last few years, and so it's nice to have something to talk about in the ACC. And look, I don't necessarily think that this is a result of getting rid of divisions, but the longer this goes on in the ACC, this one conference configuration, the more I'm actually really liking it. The more I'm actually, yes, I'm kind of not thrilled about the idea of like Clemson, Florida State no longer being the marquee game in the division, even though that obviously that's not relevant anymore because Florida State's horrendous. However, that the games that used to mean a lot won't necessarily mean as much if both teams aren't really, really good, because of this one conference configuration. Now, certainly you can say, well, I mean, even if there were divisions this year, it wouldn't make a difference because Florida State's terrible, and so Clemson would have to play somebody else to win their division. You're right. I mean, that there's an argument to be made there. I don't mind this one conference setup. I wasn't sure about it in the beginning, to be honest with you, and I'm kind of digging it. I'm kind of digging this one conference configuration that the ACC is doing. So specifically now to get into the Virginia Tech and North Carolina matchup, when you look at this, I think one thing really sticks out, and that's that Virginia Tech is going to have to they're going to have to throw the football. Their offense has been really explosive so far. Their running back, he's a Kansas transfer, Khalil Herbert. He's rushed for of his 26 carries, 10 of them have been for more than 10 yards. And then, you look at some of the wide receivers, they've had some standout plays as well. I think that ability, that explosive ability, similar to what Miami has demonstrated, will come in handy for Virginia Tech against North Carolina. There's been a little bit of an issue with Virginia Tech's quarterback having to quarantine because of coronavirus, and there's a lack of practice time there. He should be up to speed this week. I don't believe there has been any announcement indicating otherwise. But, North Carolina has a pretty stout defense, a defense right now that's not had to go up against the same caliber of opponent as a Virginia Tech. But still, right now their linebackers have 22 and a half tackles, and 8 of them have been for loss. So these guys have demonstrated, that they can get in the backfield and they can blow up some plays and have plays result in negative yards, which, again, as we talked about with Clemson Miami, is extremely important. However, when you look at North Carolina, even though the defense has been really good, I think the offense has been a bit disappointing. If you look at their matchup against Syracuse, it took them a while to get going, and they did end up winning this game 31-6, but it was 10-6 going into the fourth quarter. I mean, it was a close game. I mean, a lot of people were like, "Oh, Syracuse, maybe they'll take down UNC today," and then obviously North Carolina distanced themselves with a 21-point fourth quarter. And, I mean, I think you can afford to sleep for a quarter or maybe 2 when you're playing a team like Virginia Tech. If you're playing somebody like Clemson or Notre Dame or Miami, forget about it. You're going to get trounced. So I think you can get away with it to a certain extent. And again, you see this almost with the matchup against Boston College a couple weeks later, right, where UNC didn't score anything in the third quarter. They had a field goal in the first. It was really the second and fourth quarters where they put up some points, and that was only 6 points in the fourth quarter. It was not a high-scoring game for them. It was 26-22 final score. Now that you have to credit their defense, right, because UNC only allowed 5 points for Boston College in the second half. I mean, excuse me, I apologize. I'm looking at the box score incorrectly. So UNC came out, scored 14 points in the first quarter, and then only scored. So UNC went into the half with 21 points, and then only scored 5 points in the second half. Now, again, 2 of those points in the fourth quarter was a result of a safety. Now, Boston College, they had 16 points in the first half, and then were only allowed 6 points in the second half. So UNC's defense did step up. It was a bit of a slobber knocker in the second half, but still North Carolina wasn't able to really distance themselves. And I think that's the point that you need to take from all this, is that UNC has shown they've shown flashes of greatness on offense, but they're not a consistent 60-minute moving the football down the field. And so their defenses had to step up in some of these games and help them out a little bit. So I think for Virginia Tech, there's obviously opportunity. Virginia Tech's pass rush has been really dynamic too. They have a really great defensive line that's gotten in the backfield a decent amount, but they still have been a little bit sketchy against the run. And so that could be something that UNC takes advantage of. And so, depending on how one-dimensional Virginia Tech can make UNC, I think is going to dictate what this final score looks like. Because, listen, Sam Howell for UNC, he's no Trevor Lawrence, but he can pick apart a spotty Virginia Tech secondary if you give him tons of time. I think he can definitely be a threat. Final prediction for this game, I think it's going to be a little bit less of a scoring fest like we might see with Clemson, Miami. I think the magic number here is 28. I think the first team to 28 is gonna be in prime position to win this game. I think maybe field goal or something puts them at 31, like low 30s. I think a final score for this one that I could see is UNC 31 and Virginia Tech 27. I think it's going to be close. I think it could come down to whoever has the ball last. It could be a UNC coming from behind to go up ahead, or it could be Virginia Tech scoring with a couple minutes left, trying an onside kick, something like that. But either way, I think UNC is going to get this win. And now this brings us into the second point that I wanted to make on today's show, which is UNC really a top 10 team right now? Are they based off of their performance up to this point? We've seen them for 2 games, right? We've only seen them against Syracuse and Boston College. Are they a top 10 football team? And, right now, obviously, the rankings have shifted a lot this season. Who's been included, and some conferences weren't eligible, and all this other stuff. But, at the beginning of the year, UNC was 18th, which I thought was pretty appropriate. I felt like they were a top 25 team. I wasn't quite convinced they were a top 20 team. But, the teams that the poll had below them, Cincinnati, UCF, Iowa State, Tennessee, were less proven. So I can understand the respect that they gave to North Carolina and said, hey, we're going to put you at the top 20 instead of putting like a Cincinnati and a Utah above UNC. So either way, right, they started at 18th in the preseason. And then as this season has progressed, week 3 of the college football season, which I believe was when the first rankings came out after preseason, we had UNC moving up 6 spots to 12th. So immediately they go from 18 to 12, and then they're sitting at a top 15 team right after that first win against Syracuse, and I feel like that was really generous. Now again, that is a result of the Big Ten being shifted out of the rankings, right? So we've got all these Big Ten teams in it. We got the preseason, which is what everybody's been included, and then the Big Ten says, we're not going to play, and so all the Big Ten teams go poof, and I think it was a handful, maybe 1 or 2 Pac-12 teams that were ranked, but it was mostly the Big Ten teams. So UNC, Cincinnati, Tennessee. Tennessee moved up 10 spots to 15. They all got a huge bump, and that really hasn't gone away. North Carolina moved up to 11th the week following for week 4, and then this past week, UNC was 12th. They did drop a spot, but coming into this week, they have gone back up 3 spots to 9th. So, interestingly, a lot of the schools that were on the the tail end of the AP poll at the beginning of the season haven't really been displaced by the now inclusion again of the Big Ten teams, the Ohio States, the Penn States, the Wisconsins of the world, the Michigans. So, to answer this question, I don't think North Carolina is a top 10 team right now. I think if you look at the rankings, where they stand, you have Clemson, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Miami above North Carolina. Now, do I really think that the teams below North Carolina would lose in a head-to-head matchup on a neutral field? Penn State, Oklahoma State, Cincinnati. There is Oregon, even though Oregon hasn't played a game, so we'll really ignore them. Auburn, BYU, even Tennessee. I don't think they beat all those teams. I don't think North Carolina beats all those. I think they would lose to Oklahoma State. I think they would lose to Auburn. I think they would potentially lose to Cincinnati or BYU. Hard to say about Penn State and Oregon since we really haven't seen them play. But I don't think North Carolina's a top 10 team right now. I think they're a top 20 team. I think they belong near the SMUs of the world. They should be ranked above teams that have lost a game. They should be higher than LSU. LSU's at 17th right now, which, I guess I understand. I mean, Auburn's at 13, and they got smacked by Georgia. I really expected them to drop further than that, but we'll ignore that SEC bias. But either way, no, I don't think North Carolina's a top 10 team. Now, do they prove that they should be a top 10 team after they beat Virginia Tech? If that happens, well, maybe not. Depends on what this game looks like. If it's ugly and it's close and it's a sloppy game, North Carolina's probably not going to rise for it. And they're probably not going to rise much at all because the teams above them are fairly clearly more talented. Clearly they're better. Even if Miami loses to Clemson, I don't necessarily think that you can say that North Carolina is better than Miami and should be ranked higher. But that's probably what's going to happen because Miami's at 7, North Carolina's at 8, and if Miami loses to Clemson, they're going to drop out of the top 10. They probably drop back to 11th or 12th. So then all of a sudden, UNC is like 7th. I mean, heck, maybe they jump up to 6th and they take Ohio State's spot because Ohio State hasn't played a football game yet. Now Ohio State is at 6th. They're so high because they have 2 first place votes, which is the most asinine thing I've ever seen. I mean, that just shows you what a joke this AP poll really is when Ohio State has 2 first place votes and they haven't played a frickin' football game. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense. So you take away those 2. I don't know exactly how the point system works in the AP poll in terms of what significance a first place vote gives a team. But I think if you took away those 2, I know for a fact if you took away those 2 first place votes, because if you look at the actual total points for Ohio State, they're at 1165 and Miami's at 1148. Now, that's a pretty high discrepancy because the drop-off from Miami to North Carolina, which, again, is an indication of a realization that there's a huge drop-off, is 1148, again, for Miami. UNC is 944. That's a 200-point difference between 7th and 8th. And 6th and 7th, there's a less than 20-point difference. So those first 2 place votes are floating Ohio State into the top 6, which, again, I think is insane. I think if you want to have Ohio State in the top 15 or the top 10, okay. That's your Big Ten team that you're picking. Okay. Oh, okay. Fine. But you can't put them at 6 with 2 first place votes if they've never played a game. Not when you have other schools that are 3-0 and 4-0. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense. So I don't think that UNC right now is a top 10 team. I think they can potentially get there. But we've also highlighted some of the inherent flaws with this AP poll that show that, as much as we try and use this as a measuring stick, a lot of times it's crap. I mean, having Ohio State at 6 just doesn't make any sense. They haven't played a football game. Penn State's at 9. They haven't played a football game. Oregon is at 12. They haven't played a football. How can you say that Oregon is better than BYU if they haven't played a game? So, really shocking to see Ohio State above Miami. But again, that's the two first place votes that are resulting in that. So, either way, I think UNC, if they win this game against Virginia Tech, they're going to have Florida State, they're going to have NC State, they're going to have UVA, Duke, Wake Forest. They're going to have a pretty easy schedule that they should win. They should win. Maybe NC State gives them a little bit of a tough game, but they should win those games. Okay, they should be undefeated going into the Notre Dame game at home on November 27th. And if they are, that'll be a huge game. Because at that point, if Miami has lost to Clemson, that'll essentially determine who's going to be in second place in the ACC. And you have to look at the fact that the week after, North Carolina travels to Miami. They have a brutal finish to their season. Brutal finish. At home against Notre Dame and then at Miami before they take on Western Carolina on December 12th or December 11th. So, I don't know. Either way, North Carolina, I think right now has a lot to prove. I don't think they've proven enough to have a number 8 next to their name, but we'll see. We'll see what they do this weekend against Virginia Tech again. I'm picking them to win, so they, they have the potential, I think, to make some noise in the ACC and maybe even beyond. All right, let's take one final break. When we come back, we will do a quick preview of the Week 3 matchups for the college pick'em season. That is next. You don't want to miss it. Welcome back to the show. Again, you are listening to After Further Review. I'm Jay Smith, and we got one final segment for you on this Friday show, and that is a preview of the Week 3 college pick'em matchups. There's 9 games on the slate this week, and each of them is it's pretty intriguing. So we're going to go ahead and dive into these games and discuss them quickly. All right, first up on the slate, noon kickoff. We got Florida taking on Texas A&M. Do I think Florida wins this game? Yes. Yes, I think Florida wins this game. Do I think A&M competes in this game? Well, based off of what we saw against Alabama, probably not. A&M really didn't look very convincing against Alabama. They didn't look like they could potentially rattle a team of that caliber for a full game, for more than a quarter or two. Look, I mean, Trask is on fire right now at Florida. They're looking to stay very hot. And yes, this game is at College Station. But I really expect Florida to perform well in this game. I expect them to continue carrying that momentum forward. And I think they get this one taken care of relatively easily. The rest of the country appears to agree, because right now it's about 95% Florida on who's being picked. All right, next matchup, Tennessee at Georgia. Now, this is a Tennessee team that is ranked 14th in the country. They're 2-0 right now, and they're taking on the Bulldogs, who dismantled Auburn the week prior. Here's the thing: Georgia's going to win this game, and they're going to win it. They're going to win it handily, I think. But this is really a good test for us to determine: is Tennessee legit? Is Tennessee worthy of a top 15 ranking? Because, I believe this statistic is accurate, but I saw something last week when Tennessee had won 7 straight that they have the longest consecutive winning streak in I think in the Power 5, maybe they have 8 consecutive wins. Not sure if that statistic is accurate. I saw it from Tennessee's social media. I think it was their football account tweeted this out, which struck me as odd. But then I did think about the fact that, okay, well, LSU has lost and Clemson's lost. Like a lot of the big schools that were in the playoff last year, they've obviously lost. And so I guess this is a good test to see if Tennessee's legitimate. That's really the point of this game. Georgia is going to they're going to win. Right now, I would say Georgia wins this one by 2 touchdowns. I don't think they quite destroy Tennessee like Auburn got destroyed, because Auburn just forgot to show up. Auburn just they just forgot there was a football game that day. If Tennessee even tries, I think they can perform better against Georgia than Auburn did. So go with the Dogs, but maybe keep this one in the back of your pocket if you're flipping between channels. Again, this game is at noon, so you want to maybe flip between Florida A&M and then Tennessee and Georgia. All right, next matchup, we got Texas traveling to Oklahoma. It is the Red River rivalry, and boy, does it not matter this year. My goodness. Oklahoma is in shambles. We talked about it on the Tuesday show. The Big 12 has really just imploded, and this game really doesn't matter. It really has no significance at all beyond these two schools. I think we could see a high-scoring game. I think this game will still be close. You have to kind of ignore the 1 and 2. Again, a rivalry game, so ignore the records. Ignore the fact that Oklahoma's 1 and 2, and they've lost 2 straight conference games for the first time since 1998. And I think Oklahoma can get this done because they really don't want to go 1 and 3. And as I said on the Tuesday show, 1 loss is not good. 2 losses in a row is really bad, and 3 losses in a row is your season is over, you're in free fall. Especially if you're considered a contender of any kind in a conference. 3 losses in a row, you're like, whoa. So Oklahoma really doesn't want that. Lincoln Riley really doesn't want that. And look, Texas has had they've had some weaknesses. All right, they've shown there's a pretty good template that shows how to beat Texas. Ignoring that UTEP game, right? You look at the Texas Tech game that they should have lost. You look at the TCU game that they ended up losing, and you say, well, Texas is really a 1 and 2 team too. And the one win, they haven't really even played anybody. UTEP. In the 2 matchups where they actually had some competition, Texas Tech on the road and TCU, look very beatable. Very beatable. Very, very, very beatable. Now, Oklahoma has looked the same way. They haven't looked any better. The Missouri State game, throw that out the window. Look at Kansas State and Iowa State. The only other 2 games this season, both close games. They lost both of them. So these teams really suck. I mean, they really suck. But with that being said, I think Oklahoma wins. Because they don't want their season to be in free fall, and Lincoln Riley wants to not have an angry mob with pitchforks coming after him. It'll be close. I think this will be a close game. I think it'll be a high-scoring Big 12 game. Maybe worth checking out on Fox at noon. If the 2 SEC games turn into to blowouts, but I think Oklahoma gets this. I think they get this win. I think they somehow save the ship, even though it's already sinking. Maybe they just bail it out and keep it afloat a little while longer. Next matchup is Virginia Tech and North Carolina. We won't get into that one since we've already discussed it. Again, I'm going with the Tar Heels. We have UT San Antonio and BYU. Now, this is actually a little sneaky game, and this is 3:30 on ESPN2, and you need to watch this game at 3:30. This is going to be a good game and a good test for BYU. Right now, sitting at 15th, they have a chance to go 4-0. San Antonio Roadrunners are 3-1. And look, BYU has blown out their first 3 opponents by a combined margin of 148-24. So this is the highest the Cougars have been ranked since 2009 when they were ranked 7th And this is the first matchup between BYU and UT San Antonio in both of the schools' history. They've never played each other, so we really have no template or history between these two schools. So it's really a wild card kind of game. It's a question mark. Now, BYU leads the nation in total offense and total defense. They are averaging 585 yards per game and 8.1 yards per play. And right now, the Cougars are holding opponents to just over 200 yards of total offense per game. So they're playing as well as anybody in the country, even though obviously their opponents are not of the same caliber. I mean, you have Navy, Troy, and Louisiana Tech. But, the Army game that was supposed to be at Army that was postponed, that would have been a great measuring stick. I don't think BYU would have blown out Army. I think they would have won that game, but I think it would have been a good opportunity to see BYU against a higher caliber opponent. But that's what this UT San Antonio game will be. I think it'll be a higher caliber opponent for BYU. I think BYU wins this game and starts to make that pitch of, hey, look, we are a top 15 team. We deserve this ranking because, again, the rest of that schedule at Houston, Texas State, Western Kentucky, Boise State, it's not really going to offer them a lot of opportunity to showcase what they're made of. So this is an important game for BYU. If they come out and dominate like we've seen the last few weeks since the beginning of the season, the conversation and the narrative around BYU will certainly change. I'm going with the Cougars. Right now it's a landslide pick, which that just shows that people aren't really looking at this matchup closely because I think it could be more of a toss-up than anything, but BYU right now is the solid choice for most people across the country. All right, Kansas State and TCU are going to hop over to the Big 12. It's a TCU team that's coming off a big win against Oklahoma. It's a big win for them, a big win against Texas. Kansas State has that win against Oklahoma earlier in the year, and this is I think going to be a lower scoring Big 12 game if there even such a thing exists. But Kansas State coach Chris Kleelman, I think he's starting to kind of get in stride. And look, Gary Patterson at TCU, you can never underestimate Gary Patterson. But both of these teams have really impressive road wins on their resume. Obviously, Kansas State, again, they took down Oklahoma. And then you look at what TCU did against Texas, defeating top 10 teams in both of those matchups. I think in terms of who's the more talented team, it's probably TCU. TCU has got a sophomore quarterback and a little bit more experience. Kansas State, you're leaning on a true freshman quarterback, Will Howard, who has shown spurts of greatness, but again, we just don't have enough tape to really know, is he going to be able to sustain that throughout an entire season? This is the first game I think on the slate that could go either way. I'm taking TCU. I think they just have a few more weapons, a little bit more experience. I think this is a close game. I think it's lower scoring, maybe in the 30s or 40s, but it'll still be lower scoring for the Big 12. But it'll still be a good game. So definitely tune in to this one, 4 p.m. on Fox if you have time. All right. 3 matchups left. We got next is Miami and Clemson. We've already talked about that at the start of the show, so we won't dive into that again. I'm taking the Tigers in that matchup. 2 games left here. We got Mississippi State and Kentucky. This is a game that very few people will watch because Clemson and Miami will be playing at the same time, and Ole Miss Alabama will also be playing. But this is a game that you should pay attention to because both of these teams are better than their records. Kentucky obviously at 0-2 and Mississippi State at 1-1. I mean, look, this is a Bulldogs team that beat LSU to start off, Mike Leach's first game in the SEC. Now, I know I've been really down on LSU, and I think they're terrible this year, and they are, but you still have to give credit to Mississippi State. You have to give credit to Mike Leach for winning his first game in the conference and as a head coach at Mississippi State. If you're Kentucky, you're trying to avoid going into free fall here. I mean, you lost to Auburn on the road in the season opener. That was more or less expected. And then you got into a shootout with Ole Miss that ended up going into overtime that you found a way to lose because your kicker couldn't make the extra point. So you lost that one 42-41. And you could really tell after that game that totally deflated Kentucky, because this was a Kentucky team that coming into the season was being given, I think, a little bit of credit for the first time in a while. They were ranked. They were 23rd, taking on the number 8 Auburn Tigers. And after dropping that one and then losing to Ole Miss in such a demoralizing fashion, it really let the wind out of their sails, and everything they felt like they had as a potential for this season has kind of gone out the window, because you're 2 losses 2 weeks into the season, and so at this point, what can you really play for? I mean, the odds of a conference championship berth are slim to none with an 0-2 record in the East and Florida standing between you. It's just not going to happen. So Kentucky's season has completely been derailed by the loss to Ole Miss. I think you could still lose to Auburn and then feel like, okay, we were definitely not the better team, and we didn't get smacked. We lost 29-13, but we can still salvage the season. Well, after that loss to Ole Miss and in the fashion that they lost, it's really going to be hard for them to turn it around. And I think Mississippi State is better than their performance last week. I mean, obviously, I was a little bit surprised with how they played against Arkansas, losing that one 21-14. I mean, especially because Arkansas is the worst team in the SEC. I think they bounce back this weekend, and I think Mississippi State wins this football game. I think Kentucky their season is over. I think they just completely disintegrate, and they're in free fall. It's not going to be good then for the rest of their season, but I think Mississippi State can get this one done, and they can pick up a good win and build some of that confidence back up. Our last matchup on the slate is UTEP taking on Louisiana Tech. Look, all you really need to know about this matchup is Louisiana Tech has a much more prolific offense than UTEP, averaging nearly 40 points a game to UTEP's 20. And what's really interesting is that UTEP is sitting at 3-1, and they average 18 points a game, and they give up on average 23 points a game. Now, again, there's a bit of an outlier as a result of that Texas game where they lost 59-3, but they also have won every other matchups. Stephen F. Austin, ACU, ULM. So you can't really sleep on the Miners, but I think Louisiana Tech has a bit more of a prolific offense behind the arm of their quarterback. See if I can pull it up. I think it's Luke Anthony is the quarterback. He's a senior for Louisiana Tech. Has 10 touchdowns and 2 picks on the season. So if Louisiana Tech continues to do what they've been doing this season, I think on offense they'll be able to get this win. Maybe a game you want to tune into. Again, this is a 7:30 kickoff on ESPN2. There will be better games on at the time, but if they end up being blowouts, maybe this will be something to flip on. So going with Louisiana Tech in that matchup. But that's pretty much it for this segment. That's pretty much it for this show. So that's going to be the end of this After Further Review. Appreciate everybody tuning in, again, whether it's through the podcast or watching on Facebook. We'll have another show live coming on this coming Tuesday to break down all the big games from this weekend and who ends up emerging victorious. And obviously there'll be some news and stories and headlines that we will be discussing on the Tuesday show. So again, appreciate everybody tuning in, and enjoy those college football games this weekend. I'm Jay Smith, and this has been After Further Review.